12th October 2025. At 2:47 a.m., approximately 560 miles from the Ukrainian border, the city of Novocherkassk, Russia, was shrouded in a blanket of cold darkness. The air was still, sharp enough to sting the lungs. Just 300 feet from the railway line, a small group of Atesh partisans hid behind a row of trees. They remained still and silent, their gazes fixed on the tracks, which glimmered softly in the moonlight. For weeks, they had studied this railway line. Every schedule, every signal, every train that thundered through, each carried fuel, artillery, and rockets destined to strike Ukrainian cities. This was not a random strike. It was a pre-planned mission aimed at the lifeline of Russia's southern offensive. Above them, a Switchblade 600 drone sliced quietly into the starless sky. Its target wasn't the train itself. It was something far more vital: the signal control system, the brain that guided every rail movement. Once destroyed, a havoc would ripple through the entire network, leaving Russia's supply lines blind and broken. The drone sliced through the cold air at over 115 miles per hour, its camera feeding live visuals to the partisans. Down on the ground, a heavily loaded freight train rumbled closer, its wagons packed with artillery shells and diesel barrels. Unaware that its journey was about to end in fire, its fate had already been written in silence. Inside the control cabin, Russian soldiers were sleeping. They just thought of another routine transport, nothing unusual. But they didn't know that hundreds of miles away, Ukrainian intelligence had been tracking their schedule for days. At 2:51 a.m., a 2,000-ton train carrying artillery shells ran on the track. It enters the area that the Atesh partisans had carefully chosen. The operator gave the command, and the drone smashed into the concrete signal box. A blinding flash followed by a loud blast shook the ground. Inside the train's control cabin, alarms began to beep. The Russian operator panicked. He slammed the brakes, trying to stop before something worse happened. The screeching sound of metal hitting metal filled the night, a scream that echoed through the town. Then, finally, stillness. The train had stopped, and that's exactly what the partisans had been waiting for. The night before, the Atesh team had dug under the gravel and placed multiple M18A1 Claymore mines along the track. Each explosive was carefully wired to a remote detonator. To avoid getting noticed by patrols, they covered everything with debris. They had only one chance to get it right. If caught, they would face certain death. Yet every member of the team remained calm. They knew this strike could cripple Russian logistics for weeks, maybe months. A moment later, the ground exploded. The blast tore the steel rails apart and twisted them like soft wires. The train carrying thousands of artillery shells was now completely stranded, unable to move forward or back. The explosions this big didn't go unnoticed. It spread a wave of electronic and thermal signatures in the air. The NABO-M radar screen started flashing red. The sound of the alarms alerted the officers. They had no idea what had just happened, but they knew something terrible had gone wrong. Confusion filled the room. Arguments over whether it was just an accident or a drone attack. No one had clear answers. Orders started flying over radios. Search teams were scrambled. Air defenses were told to be ready. At 2:52 a.m., Russia's Pantsir S-1 air defense system began scanning the skies. The radar picked up 3 flying objects. These were Bayraktar TB-2 drones launched a few hours earlier. Without thinking twice, the operators fired missiles into the air, convinced they were destroying Ukrainian drones. All 4 targets hit. The Russians thought they had removed all the threats, but what they didn't realize was that they were firing at decoys. The real Atesh drone wasn't anywhere near those missiles. The explosions in the sky were just part of a trick, a distraction. The 4th drone, Orlan 10, approached from a different angle. It was pre-programmed by expert engineers. It didn't use any signals that could be jammed, but relied on an internal navigation system built to fly completely by itself. Its radar signature mimicked that of a Russian reconnaissance craft, fooling their own systems. As Russian officers frantically switched radar frequencies and jammed signals, their own sensors began to malfunction. False targets appeared everywhere, lighting up the screens. In the confusion, panic spread. Commanders shouted conflicting orders, and within seconds, Russia's own missile batteries accidentally locked onto a nearby ammunition depot. Seconds later, a massive explosion ripped through the night sky. Around 15,000 pounds of artillery shells in the bunker detonated on the spot. It was the result of chaos created by a single clever drone. The fireball rose hundreds of feet into the air. The roof of the bunker shredded into pieces. For a moment, night turned into day. The ground shook like an earthquake. Inside the command center, chaos erupted. They had just destroyed their own supply depot, all because of panic and poor coordination. As the smoke from the burning depot lit up the horizon, another team of Atesh partisans partisans, hiding a mile away, pulled another of their cards to inflict more damage. They released 20 attack drones into the air. This time they were small, fast, and deadly. Their target? A primary logistics rail bridge connecting STRlKE to the front lines. It was an important bridge for the Russian military. The drones navigated at a low altitude to evade detection. Then, one after another, they slammed into the bridge's support pillars. A series of rapid explosions echoed through the valley. At first, the 600-foot bridge groaned under the pressure. Then, with a final cracking roar, the middle section collapsed into the river below. Steel beams twisted, concrete crumbled, and the entire thing disappeared into the water. In a matter of a few hours, Russia suffered its own loss. The train was burning, and the bridge was gone too. The nearby depot was still exploding every few minutes as leftover shells cooked off in the heat. Repairing this damage would take weeks, maybe even longer. Russia's once efficient supply route was now a dead end, and with that single, perfectly timed operation, the southern supply line was cut off. Russian troops hurriedly went to the attack scenes. Russian radio channels were filled with shouting and fear. Commanders blamed each other. Units couldn't get new orders. Some thought there were spies within their ranks. The panic spread fast. The army couldn't move supplies to the Zaporizhzhia or Kherson fronts. Ammunition deliveries stopped. Artillery units on the front lines began to go silent. They had the guns, but no shells left to fire. Soldiers who had depended on nightly shipments now sat in trenches, waiting for resupply that would never come. The once constant roar of Russian artillery had turned into silence. The southern front, which depended on that single route for nearly 60% of its ammunition, was starved. Russian forces tried to cover up the incident, calling it a temporary disruption, but satellite images and reports told the truth. The line was destroyed and traffic had stopped completely. Commanders argued, units hesitated. For the first time in months, Ukrainian troops on the front lines fought with fewer shells falling around them. The Atesh mission had succeeded beyond expectations. Now the Russian war machine was slowly bleeding out. While Russia was stuck in confusion, Ukraine moved fast. Reports say Ukrainian forces advanced several miles in the south, using the quiet moment to push forward. But by morning, the partisans had disappeared back into the forests, following their escape routes. Their mission was complete. They left no clues or evidence of their existence. The balance had shifted. Russia's biggest strength, its endless firepower, was suddenly gone. And it all started with one drone and a few brave partisans working in the dark. When the smoke cleared, the scale of destruction was shocking. In total, millions of dollars worth of Russian equipment and supplies were lost, all because of a carefully planned sabotage that probably cost less than a single missile. The Atesh partisans had shown that intelligence and timing can be stronger than heavy weapons. They used a strategy instead of brute force. They studied the enemy's weaknesses, used misinformation, and struck with a perfect plan. This was more than just a successful mission. It was a message. In modern warfare, you don't always need million-dollar massive tanks or expensive aircraft to win a war. It's the drones that have changed the face of modern combat. They are the eyes, the hands, and sometimes the heart of resistance. From the skies, they turn information into action, giving small teams the power once reserved for nations. Whether it's to drop a bomb or pretend to be a decoy, these cheap and fast unmanned tools are the real weapons on the battlefield. In STRlKE, a few drones achieved what hundreds of soldiers could not. They silenced a vital supply line and rewrote the rules of modern war. It shattered the myth of unstoppable Russian logistics. With clever tactics, low-cost drones, and the courage of a few partisans, they turned a billion-dollar supply chain into a pile of rubble. Ukraine's partisans turned the enemy's own strength against them. They showed that in the age of drones and digital warfare, smart minds can defeat expensive machines. It proved something powerful. You don't need the biggest army to win. You need strategy, patience, and creativity.